Gentlemen, welcome to this 2:30 session entitled The New Media Making Tomorrow. We have a very interesting panel and conversation in store for you. Please welcome now the members of that panel. First, the moderator, Dr. Yossi Vardi, and his panelists, the chairman and CEO of Axel Springer AG, Dr. Matthias Dopfner, the CEO of Thomson Reuters, Tom Glosser, the CEO and chairman of Slide, Chin, the chairman and CEO of Management Board of the Publicis Group, Maurice Levy, the president of Skype, Josh Silverman, and finally, the founder of Wikipedia, Jimmy Wales.
Good afternoon, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to moderate the session about the new media. This session is becoming a kind of tradition after 2 years. We are doing it the second time. And we really are fortunate to have some of the world's greatest leaders, movers, and shakers in the industry. Let me introduce each of the participants very shortly. To my far right, Dr. Matthias Dopfner, the CEO and the chairman of Axel Springer Group, which is one of the biggest media conglomerates in Europe and in other parts of the world. He's also a member of the board of Time Warner. The Axel Springer Group was an avid supporter and partner of Israel in many things. They are involved both in business and in non-profit things. And Matthias, it's really great to have you here. Next. Good. Next to Matthias, we have Thomas Glosser. Thomas Glosser is the CEO of Thomson Reuters company. Each one of the two parts which created Thomson Reuters last year is a big entity in itself. They are in financial information, in media, in many other aspects. Thomas, like Matthias, is a regular visitor to Israel. And Thomas, thank you very much for coming and being here with us. Our third participant, maybe the youngest one in this panel, is Max Levchin. Max came from the Ukraine to the United States, how many years ago? 15 years ago? 20 years ago. And is a co-founder of two of the most successful internet companies. One is PayPal, which changed the way people are using money on the internet, which he co-founded and sold later to eBay. And the other one is Slide, which provides the ability to show slideshows on the internet, a very successful company as well. Next one is the lion himself, Maurice Levy, the chairman of Publicis. Maurice, we made a big effort to get a participant for this session, which will be better than the participant than last year, and we were not able to find anybody who is better than Maurice Levy, so we invited him again. How about this as a... Maurice, it's nice to have you here. Next one is Josh Silverman. Josh Silverman is the CEO of Skype. Josh, they like you because they are cheap. They want communication. And so I don't think I have to introduce Skype. Everybody seems to know it. George, thank you for coming. And last but not least, Jimmy Wales, the founder and the chairman of the Wikipedia and the Wiki organization, the guy who really changed how knowledge is being assembled. Jimmy, thank you very much for being here. Jimmy also, it's not his first visit here. I think we are very fortunate to have these great participants. We will spend the next hour and a half trying to discuss new media, what is happening and what will happen in the near future. If we have time, we will open the podium to some Q&A, and I hope that we will have a lot of fun and some insight. Before we continue, I would like to present to our great panel a short video which I found on YouTube, and I would like to ask the AV guys to put the video media, did you know? Thank you, YouTube. And now, distinguished members of the panel, I would like to ask each of you in 3 to 5 minutes, other than Maurice who gets 12 minutes, as our agreement, to share with us where are we going. We saw on the presentation that we are in a totally new era, new world. Where are we going? Jimmy, please.
Well, one of the first things that occurs to me about this video is that the first time I saw this particular video, my daughter sent me the link over Instant Messenger. She's 8 years old. And she is actually the new media. She's coming up, and she will be sort of where we all are before we know it. And she has 3 blogs that she actively updates every day. She has all of her friends who are emailing back and forth. And this world of the new media is really very much going to overtake a lot of the things that we used to know of. She doesn't watch much television. Television's not that interesting to her. She much prefers interactive things. She's doing things online. And then I think when we look at the overall trend, I think when we think about something like Wikipedia, which is now, of course, huge, the number 4, number 5 website on the internet, it's really, I think, just the tip of the iceberg. We see this huge upsurge of all kinds of participatory media. People are coming together and doing all kinds of interesting things. Some of these experiments will never succeed. Some of them will succeed, and we don't really know which ones yet. But I think that the chances are we're going to look back 10 years from now and we'll say, wow, we were really just at the beginning.
Hi, I'm Josh.
Josh Silverman.
So I think I'll start, if you don't mind, waxing very philosophical, then get a little bit more concrete about the communications industry in particular and some of the trends that I see there. But looking back in order to look forward, if you think about the history of media, the printing press was probably the first ever form of information technology and the first form of media. And what it really allowed us to do was, for the first time, build upon the learnings of the past so that we could actually stop reinventing the wheel and start accumulating knowledge. And as the printing press grew in popularity, the ability of humankind to actually begin to accumulate knowledge and build on the learning of the past grew. If you think about the history of media, really over the next 1,000 years or so, we saw some slow evolutions of that. But the internet really helped to accelerate all of that. And what I think you'd see as media expanded was the innovation cycle grew at a very similar pace. The faster we are at disseminating information, the faster we are at building upon the learnings across the world and therefore innovating. And what we're seeing right now is an explosion in the innovation cycle, where things that used to happen every 200 years are now maybe happening every 6 months. If you think about what happened with the internet in the very, very early days, it was kind of a printing press on steroids. It was a way to publish information largely one way, publishing out what we used to do with printed media. In the very early days also, we started to do some very basic database interactivity. And so the industry that really benefited from that was e-commerce. But if you think about the internet of today, it's not bounded to HTML and web pages. It's really the dissemination of any information over one public pipe. And if you think about it, very few things on earth cannot be boiled down to information, to data. So obviously content can be turned into zeros and ones. It turns out voice can also be turned into zeros and ones and disseminated over the internet. Voice is just more information like anything else. PayPal, currency, can actually be turned into zeros and ones and disseminated over the internet. A great many things in our life, in fact, really can be boiled down to information and disseminated over the internet. And so I expect we will see an ever-accelerating cycle of disruptive innovation across different industries as this spreads. So I'm going to take it now to our industry, Skype and communications. So Skype is a company that's just barely 6 years old. We announced at the end of last quarter 480 million registered users. We're adding registered users right now at a rate of over 300,000 each day. And Telegeography estimates we're about 8% of the world's international calling traffic, or about 25 billion calling minutes last quarter, growing at about 60% year over year. And mostly free, so we do get a little benefit from that. The mega trend that's happening in communications is that it's moving from being a hardware industry to a software industry, where it used to be that you had a dedicated appliance called a telephone, purpose-built for one thing, voice communications, and that was tied to a purpose-built network, the Twisted Pair Copper Network, purpose-built for voice communications. Today, any old PC tied to the public internet becomes a communications device with the introduction of Skype software. And in fact, any old PC starts with the desktop and laptop on your in your home or office. But in fact, if you think about mobile phones are just now PCs that have been shrunk down in your pocket and become wireless. And how do you use those mobile phones? Well, as we get the form factor right, as iPhone has demonstrated, you use them to browse the web, you use them to trade stocks, you use them to watch movies, and oh yes, by the way, you also use them to communicate. So suddenly communications has just become one more application on that device. It's our aspiration at Skype that when you want to communicate, we're the application you select, but there will be robust competition in that market. And when you think about the ways that we communicate, it used to be communications meant voice communications. I bet if people in this audience thought about how they spend their communication time, voice would be probably not a majority, and for many of you, not even a plurality of the time you spend communicating. So text communication, incredibly popular, originally with email. The young folks look at email the way we think about a rotary phone, right? It's all instant messaging today. But instant messaging, group chat, voice communication, conference communication, and then video. And, video calling is now over a third of all calling minutes on Skype. That's a lot of minutes. And the reason is anyone with any PC can download Skype software for free and do a video call with anyone else. And I think when you think about the transformation that's having on society, video calling is not voice calling that's a little better. It's being there that's a little worse. So voice is inherently a transactional media. When I have a voice call with someone, there's something I usually need to accomplish. It's a very thin medium, so I'm typically trying to get off the phone as quickly as I can. With a video conference, you've got a grandmother in Florida participating in the Passover Seder of her daughter and grandchildren in New York just by putting the laptop at the Passover Seder table. We have, in my office, an engineering team in Estonia and an engineering team in Prague. It used to be that I would need to give them very dedicated and clearly defined tasks because they're separated by several thousand kilometers. Today we just have a persistent video wall that separates the two of them. And if an engineer in Tallinn gets stuck on something, he walks up and says, hey, Mike, come to the monitor for a second. And it's like being in the next room, a persistent video presence. It's really changing what being there means and transforming the way that we can build meaningful communications across society. My children live 8 time zones from their grandparents, and yet they have a meaningful relationship with their grandparents. They see each other several times a week, and my 5-year-old is perfectly capable of initiating a video call with her grandmother whenever she feels like it, much to her grandparents' delight. So we're seeing rapid evolution in the space, and I guess what I would close with, recognizing who's in the audience here today, is how is a regulator to keep up with rapid disruptive change in the industry? What we find is even the best meaning regulators are challenged because you can't possibly put a regulatory framework in place that anticipates disruptive change. The whole definition is the day before Skype launched, no one could have anticipated Skype or Facebook or Wikipedia, right? And suddenly we're in a whole new world. And how does one define Skype? Clearly we're a software company. but we're having an impact on communications. We're having an impact on broadcasting. And the way regulatory frameworks tend to work is they define this is what a telco is or this is what a broadcaster is, and therefore here's the framework in which you must live. We think those frameworks become anachronistic overnight. And so the proper way for regulators to think about the industries is to think about what is the basic level of civil protection that matters, and how do we fall back on, across whatever industry it is, here's the civil protections that need to be ensured in any society. And that's really all that we focus on regulating. In that spirit, and then I will close, as net neutrality. We think for the innovation to flourish across the media and communications industry, it's very important that consumers have a choice of any application and any content they want, and that we don't allow the ISPs to become the gatekeepers that get to pick and choose which applications and which services people get to visit through their ISP. And so we're seeing some progress with that here in Israel, some progress in Europe and in the United States. We see this as one of the most fundamental issues of innovation policy in the world today, and we hope we'll continue to make progress there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. Josh addressed very, very shortly, and we will get back into it, the social aspect, and I know at least one person in the audience that will challenge your statement that video is like being there, but we will get to it later on. And Ruth, you prepare to make a comment on this comment of this gentleman. Maurice, we would like to know, how do you see the advertising? You gave us very impressive growing numbers in the last 5 years as far as the part of digital advertisement, digital business within the whole ecosystem of Publicis. How do you see the trends, and how do you see 2009 within the trends, and whatever you would like to add?
What's good with Yossi, and this is one of the reasons why I like him so much, is that he gives you a briefing, and when you are on stage, he's giving you another one. On Saturday night at 23 hours, 11 p.m., I received an email from Yossi saying, okay, you will be on the panel on Wednesday. You have 12 to 15 minutes, and you will tell us about how new media will be making tomorrow. So I'm glad to speak about advertising. But,
Maurice, we love to hear whatever you want to share with us.
No, I'm just kidding.
Voila!
I'm just kidding you. He told me that I have to make fun of him, so I'm trying to do that. I would like to come back to a few things regarding digital first. In fact, if we try to define what is making digital, there is 3 words which are coming to my mind. One is scale, and when you look at the numbers which have been thrown on this YouTube video, you see numbers which are just staggering. The second is speed, and clearly, and this has been, Josh has insisted on that, what was done in 200 years is now done in 6 months' time. The third one is blur. Everything is blurring. What was supposed to be done by a communication company is done by somebody else, etc., etc. And if you look at the world today, the most important R&D company, the most important company in the world, which is putting a lot of things to access at their fingertip, is Google. And Google is giving for free everything. Who is paying that? We are paying. We, the advertising people, are making sure that you have access to all these elements, all these things which are changing your life. Why are we doing that? First, because obviously we are generous people and we love to do that. But more importantly, simply because digital, interactive, the web, mobile phones are changing the life, are impacting impacting the life of the people like never before. Not only they are communicating, which is something which is just a small part of what all this is doing, but they are transactioning, they are being educated, they have informations, they have a lot of indication on how things are going on life. They can acquire or buy a trip, a stock, a book, anything else. They can also download a lot of things for free. And this is changing the life of the people and the mindset of the people, because what they were used to pay, they are no longer used to pay. And this is changing quite dramatically the society we live in, and the mindset of the people, and their behavior. And if we look at the world as we have been educated, at least the people of my age, in the universities, we will see that what is happening today has nothing to do with what we learn. We learn that everything has a value. Today, what is the value of the things? What is the value of an audience? What is the value of a music? What is the value of a book? You can get it for a price, and 5 minutes after, the price has gone down quite dramatically. And all this is changing everything in our lives, including the fact that we have been told during years that the news were coming from press, from radio, from TV, and we were used to believe that the hierarchy and the selection of the news were the right one. Today, we are getting news from the man in the street which are putting at risk what the Wall Street Journal is writing, simply because he is writing things with his own views and his common sense. And this is changing quite dramatically the way we, advertising people, and I'm coming to the subject, we are looking at this audience. They are no longer what we used to call consumers. And I don't like to call them consumers, because we are not addressing at them, but we are dialoguing, we are speaking with, we are communicating with people, real people, and we are interacting. And this is changing quite dramatically the things, and the crisis is having a multiplier effect, and we have seen the numbers, on the advertising spendings for the analog media. And this will change the world tomorrow. By the way, there is something which is quite interesting, and I invite you to try to find it either through Wikipedia or through Google, which is a formidable speech which has been given by the head of the Chicago Tribune, explaining how they have changed, how they have restructured, how they are again compelling and relevant to their audience. So if we look at our world and the way we are communicating, everything is changing. And all the recipes we have are things which are useful for only 50% of what we do. So we have to transform the way we work, we have to transform the way the advertisers work, and we have to change the way we are communicating with our audiences. It is much more personal, far more creative, much less formal. You have things that you see on internet which would never have been put on air on a TV set. And with an audience which is much bigger, much wider than what you can see on TV. Why that? Because it is seen as personal. And when you are addressing someone on a personal way, you can change the tone of voice. You don't need to be authoritative. And if you are authoritative on the net, goodbye. Better you come back in 2 years' time. And you don't need to be as formal as we are on a classic video system, a 30-second commercial. So we have to invent new forms of communication, new languages, new approaches, and we have also to build bonds and relationships which look as being personal. They cannot be personal because obviously when we have 1 billion consumers around the world, we cannot be personal. But it has to be felt as true, authentic, and personal as possible. And for that, there is a lot of tools, and I will not go through the analytics and all the kind of things that we can get on the net. The only thing I would like to add is that this society that will be there tomorrow can be frightening on some aspects. It will be much more open, much more democratic, because everyone will have access to all the information. But when there is so much information, and when you cannot select the information, it can be also the contrary to the democracy. And the last thing that I would like to add, coming back to advertising, is that in fact, Internet is already the number 3rd media in the world. It has reached 11%. It will reach within 2-3 years 15%. It will be within 5, 6, 7 years close to 20%. And unfortunately, to the expense of the press, the radio, and progressively and later on TV. TV will remain stable for a few years, and you can expect from 2015 that TV will decline simply because what TV will present will be absolutely irrelevant to audiences which are used to see something else. Just one thing to conclude with: we have reached this year an audience and at the same time spendings higher on internet than on TV in the UK. Audience on internet bigger than TV audiences, money spent on internet bigger than the money spent on TV. And this has naturally changed everything and the way advertisers are looking at this. So we have to transform ourselves, and this is what we are trying to do. And I can tell you something, it's very hard.
Thank you very much, Maurice. Max, again, 2 questions. One is your view of the future from your vantage point. Number 2, we saw assembly of slides. And the internet is doing something that on one hand you can have presenting information very quickly. But on the other hand, it's kind of very on the surface. So how do you see the delivery of information on the internet compared to the old way of delivering information from the depth, from the width, from that perspective? Please.
So I had a very similar experience with Yossi, who sent me with a lot less time than I would call acceptable a note that I have to prepare a 15-minute speech. But I had the exact opposite experience just now. I couldn't have asked for a better setup for what I was trying to say. So I thank you. I think maybe Maurice beat me into submission, but either way, it's very nice. I also would like to point out that all the old media guys are wearing ties, except for Maurice, who is kind of a bridging between old and new, as he just pointed out. And all the new media guys are not wearing ties.
By the way, I have to correct you. When Matthias will tell you what they are doing in new media, I'm not sure you will call him old media guy.
I tell you, this is a very conventional perspective that you're taking. I mean, instead of asking old media people to take off the ties, which is the easiest way to seem sexy, I think the new media guys should take a tie and wear one. That would be innovative.
We may or may not prepared this one.
Matthias, thank you. It was 2 C's in one shot, both conflict and comic. Great.
And this will have to do. All right, so I'll get to my vantage point. So I think a common approach and an attractive one when preparing prepared remarks is to review the old before getting to the new. One, because there's no controversy in the old. So I think media companies and consumer media companies in particular can be split into kind of 3 stages. And the previous experience, or something that's been going on for almost 100 years, can generally be defined on the content and infrastructure side primarily as having access to financing. It's not something that floats up all that commonly in conversation, but I think it's pretty clear how cable companies, TV companies, anybody who has ever built content for consumers ultimately control distribution through having access to tremendous amounts of money, leverage, being able to therefore control the audience, control distribution, and ultimately control both advertising and subscription prices. The internet fundamentally changed all that. The second stage of media companies and content production can be broadly characterized as companies that create tools. And Yossi's, I would argue, somewhat unflattering introduction of Slide was actually hammering in the point that we started our company as a tool-making company. We wanted to create tools so that people would make their content accessible to their friends and coworkers or whatever online in the fastest way possible. If you look at Wikipedia, it's a brilliant tool for making encyclopedic information available. It's a tool for others to edit it, etc. Facebook, Twitter, etc. All these systems are fundamentally platforms, tools for content creation and ease of consumption. They do, in fact, create exactly the controversy of the problem that Yossi pointed out. They can be mild wide and an inch thick or thin. Reason being, there's so much content, which parenthetically drives things like CPMs or prices of advertising down simply by the overabundance of pages or page views, that you wind up in a situation that the consumer has to ultimately make a choice what content they want to consume, and without a very clear idea what content is good or not, they wind up essentially snacking, bouncing from page to page, source to source, etc., etc. In fact, there's a sort of a controversial behavior that we're seeing in some of our studies. Consumers actually preferring to create content as opposed to consume it, because it's easier to say something than find something interesting to read. It's a whole separate topic of discussion, I suspect, which I'm not going to touch on, but it really is happening. Another common behavioral change there is the idea of retweeting or rebroadcasting content that you didn't create yourself simply to stand out. It's important to make yourself noticeable, and it's hard to create content, so it's very easy to just repeat what someone else has already said. So I think today we live in the world of an overabundance of content, tremendous number of content sources, great difficulty of selecting that content for quality, and that being a primary result of quantity, and therefore placing a tremendous amount of value on not as much content as context. The easiest way to give an example of that is people tend to come back online to where their friends are. Facebook has done a tremendous job. Twitter has also done a fantastic job of that. When you know there's an audience that wants to hear you speak, when you know that people are talking to you, commenting, rebroadcasting whatever you have to say, it tends to be more sticky than a one-sided conversation where you go read a blog and never comment and nobody ever speaks to you, or God forbid read an old media source like a newspaper or something like that. So context is rapidly, to me, becoming a more valuable commodity. If you own a site, if you own a conversation as a media company, you're a lot more valuable than owning just a single-sided broadcast source. The next step, and this is where I get to prognosticating that I believe will happen, and this is where I'm taking Slide. This is exactly where I believe the evolution of the media market is pushing us. Typically, when you have meaningful amount of context and still an oversupply of it, you have to create some sort of a system that allows you to value those contexts or value whatever commodity you have an oversupply of. The only way I know how, having spent half my life in a socialist country and watching it fail before my very eyes, and the other half in the capitalist country, which I very much prefer. I think there's plenty of capital left in capitalism as far as I'm concerned. The best way to resolve what's valuable and what's not is free market. What I think will happen next, in the context of consumer-generated content, that media companies will broadly transition themselves into being marketplaces for content. Consumers create a tremendous amount of content. At the moment, very, very small number of those are actually being compensated for it. However, there is precedent. If you look at Asia and to some extent the West, in virtual worlds, be it Second Life or IMVU or some of the products that we operate, they're now nascent economies where people create content for each other, for example, by generating virtual goods in IMVU or doing gold mining in World of Warcraft, which is technically legal but is still extremely common. These people are creating content that is purely digital and getting compensated for it in a form that's purely digital, yet in some cases there's already a way to take their digital assets and have liquidity in real-world currency. Moreover, a large number of people are keeping their online or virtual world currency inside the virtual world to be reinvested in the experience, which suggests that they are valuing the compensation they've gotten for content they've created just as well as they would value real dollars or real shekels. I believe this will spread in every form of media, wherever consumer-generated media is happening today. Consumers will be ranked by quality within the context they've created, and those that consume the content will ultimately be willing to pay, perhaps in very, very small quantities, but as someone who spent a little bit of time on the transactional side of the world as well, I believe microtransactions and all the other oft-derided barriers to consumer paying for content are going away very, very rapidly. As this happens, the world will change towards a large number of micro and sometimes macro economies where people will get compensated for their ability to write an interesting blog post, create a texture to be used in an avatar, or even simply for retweeting someone's post.
Thank you very much. Thomas, your organization reports every day, I don't know how many pieces of news, should be thousands?
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. And in the traditional journalism as we knew it, the journalist, the editor, was not only the gatherer of the information, he was also the curator. He's the guy who stood behind it. He took personal standing and responsibility for the accuracy or for the views if it was dispute, etc. Today, that every kid with a camera is becoming a reporter and can show whatever he wants. Who is the curator of the facts?
This once again proves the most important requirement to appear on a panel that Yossi is moderating is agility. So I got the same email as Maurice and Max.
You can talk on whatever you want.
No, I'll come back to your subject. I got the same email. For me, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, not 11 at night, which is part of the reason the genius of the
email was just a smoke screen, you know.
Right, exactly.
Because Ofra asked me, did you send the panelists an email that they will have any idea what they are supposed to do? So I told her, I don't have any idea what am I supposed to do. How can I brief them?
And the genius of the American economy is that we're 6 hours ahead, so we have 6 hours to think of it. And Silicon Valley, of course, leads because they have 9 hours to think about
whatever you've asked them to. But I will actually try and answer your new question.
Not new, additional question.
Right. So I think of myself as in between tie and collared shirt. One of the things I used to love about coming to Israel was I never used to have to even pack a tie. And I showed up at Yossi's conference yesterday, and I'm the only guy who's not wearing a tie. So today, you got the other wardrobe. But to me, the issue, and again, bridging the old and the new, is
everyone wants to have a polarizing debate. Not surprisingly, especially in this city. So in the capitalism discussion, it's always all market economy or all government and nothing in between. And I think the issue in media is similar. So there is no reason that you can't have an absolutely thriving citizen journalist, contributory, user-generated content world alongside a curated world. So, and none of these ideas are that new either. So I'll take the example of Thomson Reuters. The Reuters news agency was begun in 1851 by Paul Julius Reuter, actually née Israel Josephat, and we have now 2,700 journalists on contract who write news under the Reuters name. But we've had, and many media organizations have had for many, many years, stringers. And if you think of what stringers are, they are not people with whom you have an employment contract and therefore in the old media, old corporate sense are your employees. You have a contractual relationship with them. It's one step less formal. It means they sometimes publish for other media as well. But you might know them. You can say something about their quality. We let them publish under our name, and we realize that branding means something. It means something to our audience. To me, the world of citizen journalists really is the next concentric circle, right? It's the Uber stringer. We don't have a pre-existing relationship with them. But there are times when the very best news, the very best information comes from them. So I'll give you a couple of examples. When the Air France Concorde crashed in Paris tragically many years ago, there was no Reuters photographer that day at Charles de Gaulle. There were a couple of Hungarian plane spotters, the people who hang out at the end of runways taking pictures of tail numbers. And what they did was call up the Reuters photo desk, and for 250 euros, we bought the photograph, which was on the front page of every newspaper, on every website, etc. It was the best photo that was there. When the tsunami hit in Southeast Asia, I say fortunately there was no Reuters journalist or photographer there. At that point, the single best source were 1.2 megapixel photos taken from cell phones. But by the next day, or 48 hours later, we would send a photographer in there. And on the second day, I can assure you the quality of the Reuters photograph was better than the quality of most amateurs, which doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to include amateur photography, and certainly journalists don't and shouldn't have a monopoly on reporting events in the world. It's just that we need to think through more deeply, what does it mean when you turn to a hopefully trusted source? What is the trust you give to crowdsourcing? I trust Wikipedia, A, because I know Jimmy, but B, because I know all of you outside will be correcting the entry in Wikipedia. And, the stats I've seen, it's every bit as reliable or more reliable than the authoritative Encyclopedia Britannica. So, in the end, my point is just, one shouldn't be old media or new media. One should figure out a creative way to combine the two, and fortunately to date, we found a profitable way to do that as well.
Thank you very much. However, sometimes facts can be really manipulated. I would like to bring, for scientific purposes only, an expert on this issue, and I would like to ask the AV people to present, and Matthias, then I will ask you to comment on the video we are seeing. The UN Watch clip, please.
I now give the floor to United Nations Watch.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am the former commander of British forces in Afghanistan. I served with NATO and the United Nations, commanded troops in Northern Ireland, Bosnia and Macedonia, and participated in the Gulf War. I spent considerable time in Iraq since the 2003 invasion and worked on international terrorism for the UK Government's Joint Intelligence Committee. Mr. President, based on my knowledge and experience, I can say this. During Operation Cast Lead, the Israeli Defence Forces did more to safeguard the rights of civilians in a combat zone than any other army in the history of warfare. Israel did so while facing an enemy that deliberately positioned its military capability behind the human shield of the civilian population. Hamas, like Hezbollah, are expert at driving the media agenda. Both will always have people ready to give interviews condemning Israeli forces for war crimes. They are adept at staging and distorting incidents. The IDF faces a challenge that we British do not have to face to the same extent. It is the automatic Pavlovian presumption by many in the international media and international human rights groups that the IDF are in the wrong, that they are abusing human rights. The truth is that the IDF took extraordinary measures to give Gaza civilians notice of targeted areas, dropping over 2 million leaflets and making over 100,000 phone calls. Many missions that could have taken out Hamas military capability were aborted to prevent civilian casualties. During the conflict, the IDF allowed huge amounts of humanitarian aid into Gaza. To deliver aid virtually into your enemy's hands is, to the military tactician, normally quite unthinkable, but the IDF took on those risks. Despite all of this, of course innocent civilian lives were lost. War is chaos and full of mistakes. There have been mistakes by the British, American and other forces in Afghanistan and in Iraq, many of which can be put down to human error. But mistakes are not war crimes. More than anything, the civilian casualties were a consequence of Hamas's way of fighting. Hamas deliberately tried to sacrifice its own civilians. Mr. President, Israel had no choice, apart from defending its people, to stop Hamas from attacking them with rockets. And I say this again, the IDF did more to safeguard the rights of civilians in a combat zone than any other army in the history of warfare. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
So, as I said, this clip was brought only for scientific, educational purposes. And my question, what is truth in the internet era?
Well, Yossi, since I did not receive any email, I'm going to say what I want. And my only comment on that video is that if I'm talking about UN and Israel, I'm very glad that a couple of months ago, journalists from our biggest newspaper, Bild, have found in a German rooftop the original plans of the concentration camp Auschwitz. And instead of giving that to the German official archives, we decided to give it to the State of Israel, and we received a couple of weeks ago Benjamin Netanyahu at our publishing house in Berlin, and we gave him the plans, and we were very glad to see him a couple of days later presenting it towards the UN. That's the message that you should send to this institution. But apart from politics, Yossi, I think I'm invited here on this panel as a dinosaur from the old print media industry, and that reminds me a couple of 2 years ago, meanwhile, we visited a couple of companies on the West Coast in America to find out whether newspapers have any future. And so we also visited Google. And on the Google campus, we discovered a sculpture of a dinosaur. And so we thought it's a nice idea to have a photo of the dinosaur industry in front of the dinosaur. And I saw a beautiful young woman walking along, and I asked her whether she could take a photo with my mobile phone, and she said, well, of course I do that. Where are you from? I said, we are from Germany. And she said, what business are you in? And I said, well, we are in the newspaper business. And she looked at me and said, newspaper business? Ah, I heard about it. That's this print thing. So that showed me that we are seen like dinosaurs and we are talking about ourselves as dinosaurs. I think it's a big mistake. You can commit suicide out of the fear to die. And I have to admit in our case that we are complaining on a high level. We had to release a profit warning of a very special kind the day before yesterday. And we had to inform the capital markets that our third quarter profits went up 10% compared to previous year. And previous year was the historic record profits in the history of the company.
Good for you.
That is partly thanks to the fact that our print business, the newspaper business, is still doing well. We have a margin of more than 20% in this environment, but also that we have digitized our business very early. 20% of our entire sales and 16% of our profits are deriving from online activities. And of course, we were digitizing and transforming our business very early. And I think there is really no, and if you look, I mean, 7 of our 10 biggest online activities are already profitable, and the 2 highest margins of the company are also generated with online businesses. So it shows clearly if you embrace the progress, if you don't see it as a threat, if you have the will to self-cannibalize your business, then the sum of it might be positive. So I really cannot join this general depressive mood of the media industry that everything is going down now. It really depends on. And I think it's a privilege to participate in this change. I mean, what are the 4 most important inventions of mankind? I would say it's the language, because language enables people to communicate. Then it's
Please be seated. Yes, Matthias.
well, that's a tough one now to continue. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a wonderful privilege to speak in front of you. No, briefly to conclude, I mean, I really think it's a great opportunity to participate in this digitization process, and of course this is very much change driven. Everything is changing, and we have seen it. The Ray Kurzweil sentence is very impressive. What fits into a house today will fit into a blood cell in a couple of years of now. That shows the degree of radical change. And everything is changing, and everybody is preaching change. From Obama to every management trainer at the moment, it's all about change, because change is the key success factor, yes. But in this environment, I would dare to say we might also think about what is going to remain. How about continuity? A certain degree of continuity is also a success factor. And if we are talking about the media industry, I have just 3 things where I'm deeply convinced that they're going to stay, to remain, and that there will be continuity. I think that is quality content. In the end, it really matters whether there is somebody who knows how to tell a story. Professional storytelling, professional research will be a strength and will play a role, and there will be a desire. Second, and I know that this might be controversial, I think also in the World Wide Web we will discover step by step leadership and strong brands. I do not believe that if every information is available everywhere at any time, that there is no desire for leadership. I strongly believe that not everybody wants to be in every situation its own program director. People want to be led. They want to have people that are making decisions, that are selecting what is important, what is not so important, and with that you can create brands. They might look different, and of course user-generated content will play a bigger role, and that's not a threat to us, it's an opportunity. We are using user-generated content not only in the web, also in the print media. Bild is publishing user-generated photos, 12,000 in the last 2 years, and it is an important part of the quality, meanwhile, of the newspaper, but nevertheless, there are people who have to make a choice, and so I believe in the principle of leadership. And the third is that I also think that since thousands of years, people are willing to pay what they really like and what they are really interested in. That is true if you go to a retail store, and that will also be true in the information space on the web. So we have to make sure, we media people and publishers and content providers, we have to make sure that we are offering fascinating, creative, professional content, and that we create strong brands with that, and that we provide easy to use pay models, and that we really convince people to pay for what they get. And if that is achievable, and I'm an optimist here, then I think we have a glorious future ahead of us.
Thank you very much. Before we move to the next part, I would like to ask the panel members if anybody has an uncontrollable urge to react on something which was said. Yes, please, Maurice.
I would like to insist on what Matthias has said so rightly. I think that, Tom Glosser said approximately the same. When you have a brand which is very strong and you have a process which is very serious about controlling the content on what you are offering to the people, this brand has a value which will help you to go to the next step, and I'm pretty sure that this is part of what will remain. And the great brand will stay for a long period of time and way beyond only the news.
Thank you.
I think I disagree with something Max said. I don't see a trend towards people getting paid for making a really good blog post. With the small exception of what we have today, if somebody makes a really popular blog, of course they could have some ads. I don't see a trend towards micropayments for things like blog posts or good things like that. And I think that we're not going to see a trend very much in that direction. Of course, as we develop more and more ability to have micropayments, I'm sure we'll see a little bit of that. But I think that when we think about people being compensated for things that they're doing online, if we think about it in terms of money, we're really missing the point of what most of these people are really doing. They're involved in expressing themselves. They're involved in community. So they're talking to their friends. They're talking to their fans. And they may have 73 fans in the entire world, but they like having 73 fans. They don't want to make 73 cents from their 73 fans. They want to have a conversation with them. So I just don't see this idea that we're moving in towards a paid micropayments world. I'm not convinced.
Thank you. You are allowed if you can make the microphone work.
I can make the microphone work simply with the power of my voice, apparently. So I wasn't implying that everyone is about to get paid 73 cents. My point was, in fact, working well with Maurice's previous point, that there are opportunities for people to build real audiences and real brands. I think the traditional media companies will remain with their brands and are best advised to leverage those brands in transitioning into the new old digital world, but there'll be tremendous opportunities for consumers that create their own names and their own voices out of nothing into real paid systems for both brand name and ultimately revenue generation.
Do we have something like crowd wisdom? Do we have the wisdom of the masses? Is it real wisdom or it's just noise?
But I mean, it's both, of course. There's crowd intelligence and there is crowd stupidity. I mean, it's both. The web is not bad or good. I think it's a big mistake to see the web as something that you have to put into one basket. The web is everything. It's a virtual version of our life and a new dimension of communication. And you have thieves and heroes, and you have good things and bad things. You have wisdom and stupidity, everything.
Can you please put the Mary Wisdom clip, please?
Hi. I hate my phone. What do? This is crazy.
Let's run a free upgrade check. See if you're due for a new smartphone.
Don't I need to go to my carrier store for that?
No, you don't have to. We sell phones and plans on all the major networks.
Okay, well, is time travel possible?
Yes, I am from the future.
Phones, plans, and advice from thousands of people eager to help.
So this was a clip of the blue shirts of Best Buy, which were turned by Best Buy to a group of people who answer questions on Twitter, etc. Best Buy moved part of their customer support into the wisdom of the crowd. In this case, the crowd are the tens of thousands of employees of Best Buy. Jimmy, is it a viable model?
I think it definitely is. I think there are many more than just this one. This is a very cute example, and of course they're taking very positive advantage of the current Twitter mania that's going on. But the idea of taking a lot of what was normally done inside the company and bringing it out into the public eye that's an ongoing trend that I don't think we're going to see an end to anytime soon.
If I could jump in there, I think the interesting economic question is it's undoubtedly a good business move by Best Buy to externalize the cost that they would otherwise have of an in-house, essentially expert network. The question that comes over to the debate you're having with Max is, would it be a good independent business? Would you actually pay the 73 cents for the wisdom of the crowd, or would you just expect to get that for free, given the number of people who will express and who will guide you to, let's say, the answer to how to connect your new flat panel display?
Good. Mr. President, you have in front of you some of the best minds in the internet space. If you have any question you want to ask them, just hint to us and we will give you the opportunity to ask them a question. Okay, I would like to move a little bit to a very important aspect of the effect of the internet on our life, and this is how the internet is affecting the social garment, how the internet is affecting social life. Josh Silverman said that video is like being there. My good friend Ruth, I'm sure, is not in agreement. And do you want to come to the podium, or do you want me to bring you the microphone? So let's hear what can you teach this young man?
Thank you. First of all, I would like you to know that a new prophet arose in Israel today, because Yossi knew exactly what I'm going to say. So you are the new prophet, Be'eretz Israel. What I would like to say is I'm very worried about all of you, because I would like to have communication, and not only communication. I need, when I like somebody and when I want to communicate, I need to touch. So your 8-year-old daughter worries me. Unless all of you, I'm not even talking in the presence of the president of Israel, not going to talk about sex. But you all know what I'm thinking about. You know what I'm thinking about? That what you have to do, please, is I'm all for that. I have a website. I know what a Twitter is. I'm worried about young people undressing and it being up in the universe and it being there forever and ever, and all of those things that we have to worry about. So parents have to watch what their children see and do on the internet, which, listening to you brilliant media people, it's going to be very difficult for parents. So you must find, Maurice, you have the obligation to find a way that personal communication rests, because our next generation will not be able to have a conversation face to face. They are not going to be able to talk and read what people think. So with all of the communication, bravo, I'm entering the 21st century, but you have an obligation to keep something alive that has to do with touch and communication and smiling and seeing somebody and sex.
Thank you very much. Anybody in the crowd would like to oppose what Dr. Ruth is saying? Raise your hand.
Yossi, I have a crucial comment on a matter of sex. And Yossi, you're probably wondering what I'm talking about. So I met my wife on ICQ. Thank you, Yossi. a complete accident, but I consider Yossi almost a part of the family. And and not only that, despite a completely internet relationship, we're expecting our first child. So I assure you, we have had sex despite being very much connected and met on the internet.
So I just wanted to defend Skype in this regard because like many people, I use Skype a lot. And one of the amazing things, if I were a businessman traveling the way I travel 30 years ago, I would have kept in touch with my daughter by telephone, and it would have been extremely expensive. Now I speak to her every day, full screen video, and of course I hug her and I hold her and we do things when I'm at home. But when I'm traveling, when I'm away, I maintain a much more personal relationship than I would have ever been able to without Skype. So thank you to Skype.
So, unfortunately, I cannot give any answer that is related to the internet. But since I've met you 3 years ago in the lobby of the Carlyle Hotel, and you gave me 3 of your books, and I read them aloud to my wife, I have no problem in that area. So thanks so much.
I see that the discussion is getting, all of a sudden it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You know that for us professional participants in conferences, this is regarded as the graveyard session, because after lunch, but I never saw this time slot so vivid. By the way, Max, you don't have to thank me. I think in the crowd we have Sefi Vigizer and Amnon Amir, who really invented ICQ, so they are the guys which you should thank later on. I think that, please,
You want to say something?
Mr. Silverman would like to protect the Skype. Before Mr. Silverman will protect Skype, I would like to cite true data. Seriously, I read that 42% of women and 36% of men preferred the internet to sex. Are we becoming an extinct species?
I'll politely pass on that. But I will say my parents would be so honored that I took a question from Dr. Ruth, and a wonderful privilege for me. You know, the world is becoming more interconnected. We're helping families when they can't be there, and we all understand that. I do think it's important to talk about creating real connections across boundaries that otherwise can't happen. So we all think of the grandparent and grandchild connection, but I just had the great privilege to meet with some of the folks from the Paris Center for Peace, who are talking about how Skype and video conferencing is actually being used to create connections between school children in the Palestinian Authority and school children in Israel who have ever fewer chances to connect, and how, you know, by the time you're a full-grown adult, that those stereotypes have been formed. You know, I heard a wonderful story last week about a school teacher in inner-city Brooklyn, very, very poor neighborhood of Brooklyn, who every single semester does video calls with a very poor favela in Brazil and introduces her children to other children that have economic hardship in their lives. Peacekeepers in Africa are using Skype and video calling now to train each other on techniques. Children from hospital beds who are in a hospital room for 6 months or a year can actually complete their schooling via video conferencing. So we really do think that this is a very, very positive trend in the world that's helping to bring people closer together across many barriers, many of which are really insurmountable otherwise.
Thank you, Maurice.
I would like to say something a little bit personal to Ruth. First, as a Frenchman, we know a little bit about sex, and you should not worry about that. We will continue for thousands of years. And as a Jewish father, we know also something of being a Yiddish mama. And we know what it is to touch and to take care of the kids and to communicate with the kids. So on that front also, don't worry. Even if we are connected, we have the relationships which build the future.
I can't leave the subject either, so I just tell you a quick story in honor of Dr. Ruth's intervention. I was best man at a friend's wedding last year, and they met on the internet. And they were actually a bit embarrassed about it, embarrassed to tell their family. So I decided, being the quiet type, that I would out them at the wedding and tell their parents that was the way they had met, because they were always a little bit quiet and somewhat devious about it. And the story I told was the actual truth, which is compare sort of Stone Age, my era dating, and modern dating. So in modern dating, they had emailed each other extensively. They had shared their music collections and books they read online. They had done video chat long before they ever met. They actually knew each other. And this wonderful, intimate past of human contact that we're searching for, at least in my life, is 2 a.m. in a bar underneath some university. I run into my future wife. Now, that turned out to be pretty wonderful also, but there's something to be said about actually getting to know the other person over a period of time, even if it's electronically.
And also, Dr. Ruth, if you open an account on Facebook, you can say that you are tall male, 34 years old, and you will be surprised what will happen to you. Good. I think that we can open the floor to some question and answer, and we need a roving microphone and maybe a light in the audience so we can see who would like. Yes, please give him a microphone. No, this guy was first over there. Please state your name and your affiliation, and like in Facebook, it doesn't have to be true, just interesting.
My name is Cindy, I'm 19 years old, I'm a woman. My name is Aryeh Green. I run a small operation here in Jerusalem helping foreign journalists to report accurately from the region. My question to Tom or to Matthias or to the others, I want to pick up on something Dr. Ruth said, because she talked about an obligation that the new generation of technology developers in the new media have to protect our children. I think, Tom, we see today your reliance on and the media's reliance on stringers and non-professional journalists certainly has something to be lauded because of the kind of photos you could get from your example of the tsunami. But you made a very important point, that the professional photos that came the next day were actually better. Higher quality, I think, is the word you used. And years ago, journalism was described, if you talked about quality journalism, with words like truth, accuracy, and balance.
Don't forget question mark at the end of the statement.
Fair enough. My question is, what are you doing to protect at Reuters and for all of you involved in publishing or in information presentation, what are you doing to protect those values of accuracy and balance in reporting when you're relying, as Wikipedia does, on an entire array of opinion and agenda-driven information that's being given to you?
Thank you. I would like to take the liberty and also to direct this question in parallel to Jimmy as well.
Okay, why don't I jump in? I'm not a journalist, so your question really is addressed to the editor-in-chief at Reuters, but I'll fill in for him today. The first thing that he would say also is, we get it wrong sometimes, right? We do a lot. So let's start with photography, which you mentioned. So we've worked with camera manufacturers, in our case with Canon, to work on essentially an electronic fingerprint, a audit trail, so that when it's a Reuters photographer using Reuters-approved equipment, using the right flash card, we can see if it's been tampered with, number one. Number two, we have a very strong rule, which actually has been violated at times, against the use of Photoshop for anything other than improving the contrast. So there are a whole series of measures. Part of it's training, part of it is using two eyes, You know, if it's a West Bank Palestinian who writes the story, it's typically an Israeli on the desk here in Jerusalem who edits it, but things still slip through. The issue is that you should try. You should set out your stall and say, we aim for independence, freedom from bias, and accuracy. We're all human beings. We can't escape our upbringings. We can't escape the violence around us in our communities, but we can do our utmost to try and balance it. And there are organizations that do. I know Matthias does as well.
I mean, just from my side, and I am a journalist, just in the actual role of a CEO, but I think it really is a question of priorities that we are setting in this process of change and of transformation, and that has to do with cost cutting. I think if we are discussing too much technology and distribution and new infrastructures, then we might neglect the fundament, the basis of our business, and that is the content quality. And that has simply to do also with the priorities of money distribution. We are famous for radical cost cutting, but nevertheless we protect the editorial quality. We cut costs in management and administration, we cut costs in IT, we cut costs also in the editorial teams, but in layout and in production processes. But if it comes to reporters, if it comes to writers, if it comes to the intellectual capacity of an editorial team, we really try to protect that. That is the distinguishing factor. If we reduce our business just watching user-generated content and watching new players around the block, by then only delivering, in a way, commodity news that everybody has, then we should not be surprised that nobody wants to read it. In the end, it's very old-fashioned what makes a content attractive. I think it has to do with the fact whether it's new or not. Still, something that is really new, that nobody knew before, has a certain attractiveness. The second thing is it should have a clear standpoint if it comes to opinion. We don't see the relevance of opinions. They say, well, it could be this way or the other way around. We really want to have people that stand up and say, this is my view, and then people can either contradict or agree, but they somehow react to what they have read or seen. And the third aspect is the quality of language. You have to express yourself in a language that is fascinating, that is concrete, that is entertaining, that is in a way emotional and is touching the people and seducing people. If you achieve that, then you will be successful. But if you try to adapt yourself, then you really might commit suicide out of the fear to die.
So one of the things that Matthias said earlier was he talked about the value of curated content, of something that has some thoughtfulness and selection to it. And I think if we want to understand the phenomenon of Wikipedia, and the reason it's become so popular is because our community takes that idea very, very seriously. We don't think of Wikipedia as a place where anyone can come and publish any random thing that they want. And there's a whole social structure behind it where people are really taking on that role. And they have a very, very old-fashioned view, just the one you just described, about what it means to have quality. To have a quality entry in Wikipedia means it's well-sourced, it's clear, it's easy to understand, it's lively, interesting to read. All of those old-fashioned values about what it means to have a quality encyclopedia article are very much adopted by our community. So one of the things that I think is at risk, or one of the ways of thinking that people fall into that I think is mistaken, is to think about the old media and the new media, to think about curated, top-down, professional content, and thinking on the other side of random blog posts and who knows what kind of random stuff people are sticking on YouTube and whatever. But I think what's more interesting is to notice that there's a lot of hybrids going on. And those hybrids take a lot of different, very interesting forms. And the hybrid could be, well, you have the Wikipedia where people are coming together and really thinking in a very thoughtful way about the process and really debating about editorial standards and things like this. But it also takes the form of Reuters saying, hey, actually, beyond our stringers, there's also another group of people who actually have some input into the process. And that we have to defend the quality of the brand of Reuters. Reuters doesn't want to start publishing a random RSS feed of whatever Twitter feed. But they do want to say, actually, there is a whole world of information that we can curate and put a little brand value on.
I totally agree with what Jimmy said, and I would even go a step further. I think this old discussion, is the web, is the internet ruining the quality of content? It's totally stupid. I think the web is improving the quality of content. It provides new opportunities, and it depends on the journalists and on the content providers whether they use it or not. But to say the internet is ruining the content quality is just bullshit.
Mr. President?
Well, first of all, it's fascinating to listen to you. Thank you very much. I believe the greatest contribution of the Internet. Okay. I think the greatest contribution of the Internet to all of us people is to enable us not just to enjoy free expression, but self-expression. Until now, free expression was really given to a very small group of people. Today, everybody can express himself and address an audience, whether individual or collective, upon his choice. My question is, can the Internet, instead of being a reporting institution, to become a teaching institution? Not to report what has happened, but to teach what may happen. To become an educational channel, and instead of addressing the lowest common denominator, trying to elevate everybody to the highest possible potential. Thank you.
Maurice, this is too complicated. You will answer it.
As always, Shimon Peres is taking us to another level. And obviously what the President of Israel has just stated is something which we will all agree with. The only problem is that it is very difficult because the very nature of Internet, and I'm not always agreeing with my friend Matthias on that aspect, the very nature of Internet is everyone can put on the net whatever he wants. And the nature of the system is that we have access to billion of information, which are not always what we need, which are not always elevating the level of knowledge. And fortunately, there is a lot of initiative from a lot of places which are helping us and which are not only giving us access to a lot of information, but to knowledge that we would not have access to if there was not Internet. And if we go to any kind of site today, we can really have a lot of news, information, knowledge, which is making us a little bit better.
Since Maurice Lévy contradicted, I would like to contradict too, because I think, Mr. President, the Internet does already what you are asking. I mean, there's so many examples on the web, and Wikipedia is one of them, but thousands of scientific websites and I mean, medical information is available to everybody around the world. I mean, what an achievement to distribute, in a way, special interest know-how and very, I mean, high-end know-how to everybody who wants to have access to it. So I think it is already educating people in a wonderful sense. Should we go further and should we ban stupid content from the web? I have very fundamental doubts whether we should do that, because the web is in the end a technical tool that is distributing everything that mankind does. Good things, bad things, crime and very valuable educational things. And I think we should not control the web. Otherwise that would be the Chinese model, and I think for democracies that's not the thing. We need to rely on the in a way, on the control of the consumer, and we should rely on the diversity of the web, and I think that's much better than to have a kind of top-down control in this World Wide Web.
So, fully agree.
So,
I just wanted to throw my favorite controversy back in the mix. I think your question is actually precisely, this kind of a problem is exactly the sort of a thing that can and should be addressed through the idea of people being compensated for the knowledge they have to offer. There's a tremendous shortage of teachers worldwide, and yet there's some brilliantly educated people that do not have an audience to speak to, even though they possess fantastic knowledge that can be shared. The internet is exactly what Matthias just said, is a fantastic tool to allow those people to deliver lectures, and there's plenty of great examples of universities such as MIT or Berkeley placing majority of the lectures online already. This can and should be, and is being extended directly to the individuals that have information to share with children and adults alike. So long as there's an appropriate compensation structure in place, this can be their primary way of making money, thereby enabling people or children everywhere to become as best educated as they can have access to on the internet, which should be infinite.
So if just one more comment on that.
We still wait that you will answer Dr. Ruth. You still owe an answer.
I'll come back to that. I will answer, Dr.
Go ahead.
I think it's a great question, the right question, and it's in keeping with what we've talked about, the tyranny of choice that's coming from the explosion of content, in converse to the democracy of self-expression. And I just look at, in any authoritarian regime around the world, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to control broadcasting, and you want to control the schools. Because as soon as you control broadcasting in the schools, you have an opportunity to dictate the information flow and thereby control people's, their ability to think for themselves. What we're seeing right now is exactly the reverse, right? That every possible opinion is now available to anyone on the web. Generally, I have to think that's a democratizing and a very positive thing for mankind. It does result in a lot of very hateful things or things we don't like being on the web, and I think that's an unfortunate consequence. But what's required then is the further development of critical reasoning, where we have to rely on the citizenship to be able to make decisions when reading an article, when reading a comment on a blog post about whether or not we agree. And I think this is a necessary development for any democracy to work as well, that we've trained our young people to be good critical thinkers, and you can't do that if you're not exposing them to difficult choices and then leaving it to them to make those decisions.
Good. Before we close this session, I would like to ask the audience to stay, not to leave, but before the President leaves, because we have another part to this session, so please stay on your seats. Number one, I would like to, no, unfortunately we don't have time. Number one, I would like to settle the account, you 6 rebels. Each one of you got is 12 to 15 minutes, but installments. So we are even, okay? That's number one. Number two, I think that Dr. Ruth said something very important, and this is the importance of the human touch. So I would like now to ask each one of you to turn to his neighbor, either to shake his hand, or to hug him, or to give him a kiss. Touch your neighbor, you are not going to be sued. Good. I would like now, we will proceed to the launching ceremony for the virtual communication postage stamps being issued by the Stamp Service for Israel Post in honor of 3 revolutionary Israeli products that changed the way we communicate. I'm delighted to invite Josh Schwartz, Secretary General of the Jewish Agency, to moderate the ceremony. I would like to thank the great panel and to ask them to leave carefully. You were great. And before, please be seated. Please be seated. And before I give the microphone to Josh Schwartz, I would like to do one more thing which is not in the program. This conference was created by an enormous amount of work of number of dedicated people. I would like to ask everybody who was or is involved in the production of the conference to raise his hand. The people over there, Ofra, the people who are taking care of order, Debbie, Israel Maimon, stand up, raise your hand, and you guys show them and what do you think about the work they have done. And Josh Schwartz. Josh? Thank you very much.
Esteemed guests, the Virtual Communication Stamp Series presents 3 technological breakthroughs that were developed in Israel and have become household tools throughout the world. In instant messaging software of ICQ, USB flash drive of M Systems, and voice over internet protocol of Vocaltech. With us today in our audience are those extraordinary individuals who have taken part in the invention, development, and establishment of these 3 companies. In addition, we wish to pay tribute to the vast number of people who also contributed to the success of these products. I would like to invite the President and CEO of Israel Post, Mr. Avi Hachman, to address us. Please.
President of the State of Israel, Mr. Shimon Peres, Mr. Eden Bertal, General Director of Ministry of Telecommunication, ICQ founder, Mr. Sefi Vigiser, Internet entrepreneur, Dr. Yossi Vardi, inventor of the USB flash drive, Mr. Dov Moran, voice over Internet protocol, interpreter, Dr. Eilon Ganor, Chairman of the Organization Committee of 2009 President's Conference, Mr. Israel Maimon, and Director of Philatelic Service, Mr. Yaron Ratzon. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, the Israeli Postal Company salutes the many international achievements in the field of communication technology for their contribute to Israel's prestigious reputation as world leader in technology. The virtual communication stamps that we are launching today are dedicated to the 3 groundbreaking technological products that were developed in Israel: instant messaging software, the USB flash drive or disk on key, and voice over internet protocol. In the year 2009, these products are used daily by millions of people and companies worldwide, and it's hard to imagine life without them. They represent a great contribution to the world, and we are proud to label them made in Israel. The Israeli Postal Company is the country's leader postal technology, and it is itself in the midst of technological revolution. In addition to the state-of-the-art sorting technology used in our postal delivery, we provide our customer with a wide range of innovative and online products and services via advanced computerized network. Israeli Postal continues to strive to develop innovative and technologically rich services for the benefit of our customers. We have chosen to show our recognition and appreciation of Israel's achievements in the field of virtual communication by way of stamps. Israel's stamps, besides being a means of payment for postal delivery, also serve to immortalize the people, places, and events that shape and represent the face of the nation. I wish you all an enjoyable time at this fascinating conference. I would like to thank Israeli Postal Philatelic Service, directed by Yaron Ratzon, for the dedicated work, and to the designer of the stamp, Mr. Chaimi Kivokovich, for his original and spectacular design. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Please stay on stage for the unraveling of the stamps. At this point, I'd like to invite to join us on the stage Advocate Eden Bartal, who is the Director General of the Ministry of Communications, Mr. Yaron Ratzon, who is the Director of the Israel Philatelic Service at Israel Post, Mr. Sefi Vigeser, a founder of ICQ, the creators of instant messaging software, who will be presented the stamp in the name of the company's founders and developers, Yair Goldfinger, Arik Vardi, Amnon Amir, and Yossi Vardi. Mr. Dov Moran, the founder of M Systems, which brought us the USB flash drive, who will also receive this stamp in the name of the company's founders and developers, Ari Mergi and Eyal Bichkov. Dr. Elon Ganor, the former chairman and CEO of Vocatech, inventors of the Voice over Internet Protocol, who will be presented the stamp in the name of the company's founders and developers, Alon Cohen, Lior Haramati, Ofer Shem Tov, the late Alad Sion, Ofer Kahane, Dror Tirosh, and Rami Amit. And Advocate Israel Maimon, the chairman of the 2009 Israel Presidential Conference facing tomorrow. Please, Israel, the unveiling of the stamp. Okay, I'd like to ask everybody to remain on stage. At this point, we're going to actually present the framed stamps themselves. The Director General of the Ministry of Communications, Advocate Eden Bartal, and the President of Israel Post, Mr. Avi Hochman, and the Director of the Israel Philatelic Service, Mr. Yaron Ratzon, will now present the framed postage stamps. Please, the order of the first one is Mr. Sefi Wigeser, ICQ's founder. Please. The next frame stamp will be presented to M Systems founder, Mr. Dov Moran. The next frame stamp will be presented to the former chairman and CEO of Vocaltech, Dr. Alon Ganol. The penultimate stamp will be presented to our very own Yisrael Maimon, the chairman of our conference steering committee. And last, but certainly not least, I have the honor to invite our host, President Shimon Peres, to come up on stage and also to receive a stamp. Please, Mr. President. And now, I would like to invite to come up onto the stage all of the representatives of the three fabulous companies for a group picture with the President, with Yisrael, with the Director General of the Communications Ministry, the Israel Post Service. Everybody, please come up. Ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you for being with us at this beautiful plenary, and I'd like to remind you that in the folders that were distributed earlier, you all received the first line of these wonderful stamps. So thank you all. Thank you, Mr. President. This ends our plenary. Thank you very much.